Good morning. Here is the Sunday edition of Severe Weather Outlooks, and we still have a lot of activity in the central U.S., but some of this also moves quickly to the eastern seaboard as well. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. Of course, we're going to start with today, Sunday. Large area of slight risk, which is the yellow, level 2 out of 5, from the high plains, Nebraska and Kansas, and then looping back through Oklahoma, right through the Ozarks and all the way over into southern Illinois and Indiana, even parts of Kentucky for today. So when you see this, just to bring you up to speed, that's the SPC's forecast. It's a categorical forecast, and it just means what's the coverage of any type of severe weather, and what's the likelihood. So any type of severe weather would be hail, strong winds, and of course tornadoes. And then we can break that down in a little more detail, especially on the day one forecast like today and the day two forecast like Monday. So as an example, here's the tornado risk. So within that area, here's the specific risk of what a tornado profile would look like. So the green is a 2% chance of a tornado, any strength, within 25 miles of any point you pick, so where you live basically. And then the brown is 5% risk, a little bit higher. And that 5% risk is around the Springfield, Missouri area, Joplin, and covers the northern part of the Ozarks into central Missouri. Jefferson City is in that, St. Louis, Cape Girardeau is in that, Hannibal is in that, Springfield, Illinois, Effingham, where they had the recently rated EF3 tornado from that outbreak a week ago, and then or a few days ago, actually, that was Wednesday, wasn't it? And over into Indianapolis as well. And then you have the lowest intensity level. So that black area just means most, if a tornado occurs, high probability it'll be EF1, a 0 or 1, but about a 1 out of 5 chance it'll be EF2 or stronger. The hail, a wind risk rather, is present in the slight risk area, but it most enhanced over the parts of northwest Oklahoma back into parts of western Kansas as well. And with the hail risk, again, it kind of the most intense hail, which is in the black area where we have a probability that's at least enough to mention that we may have 2-inch hail or larger. It kind of stops around Joplin, but then curves back to Woodward, Oklahoma, and then northward to North Platte, Nebraska. So there is some hail risk of some mention in this severe weather risk today as well. NATOcast, this is the tornado part of NATOcast, and it shows the highest probability of an EF2 or greater in that black hatched area there from St. Louis over to Indianapolis, roughly, Terre Haute, that area. So that's pretty significant. Again, that's affecting the same areas they were just pounded with multiple tornado reports back on Wednesday. And then if you're looking for the tail end of that, there's a 5% risk that goes back into southwest and west central parts of Missouri, and also a little bit of risk there out in the high plains. This is the HRRR's rendering of what the radar might look like. I have this looping, I believe it goes through 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. So you can kind of see there's two phases to this thunderstorm area. There's the first one that takes up the first few frames, and then there is additional activity expected along the front later on this afternoon, early this evening across southwest Missouri. And so either one of these areas could produce severe weather or tornadoes, either the first line or the second line. And this has been a theme for the last couple of outbreaks now, where we've had a thunderstorm line go through rather early, and then the forecast challenge has been to see how much that atmosphere has a chance to recover behind the first line by late afternoon. And in June, I think there's enough energy and the days are long enough, so that actually has been happening. So it's been an interesting kind of occurrence. So some people may get 2 rounds of severe weather today, especially the Missouri part of this forecast. So if you look at tornado risk from StormNet, it does put one bullseye there. And these are hourly forecasts. So this is the first wave, if you will. That's 1 p.m. And then going ahead, and we look how it moves into Illinois. I believe that's the 7 p.m. forecast. Anyway, you can kind of see how that main tornado risk develops. But what is not on here is the secondary development across southwest Missouri. So for folks living in the Ozarks, just be aware that the thunderstorms that reform after the late morning activity could be equally as severe. The tornado threat at CSU, their learning machine model, Colorado State University, puts a 5% tornado risk right along I-70 in Missouri and over into Springfield and covering Illinois and covering most of southern Illinois with hail and wind risk, but the wind risk kind of bullseye right around St. Louis in that area for later on today. And remember, with all these forecasts, they're meant to be 24-hour forecasts. So this is meant to be what happens between now and 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. So just keep that in mind that, again, there's two lobes to the severe weather today, depending on where you live in the areas. Then we go ahead to Monday, the lee side of the Rockies, level 2, so Wyoming and eastern Colorado, and then over into Virginia, North Carolina, Delaware, that area for tomorrow as well. Tornado risk, though, as outlined so far today, is only over around the eastern part of that forecast. So from Harrisburg, PA, down to Fredericksburg, over to Harrisonburg, but it includes the nation's capital, Baltimore, all of Delaware, Atlantic City, Philadelphia, all on that 2% tornado risk for Monday. They also have a wind risk that gets up to about 15% or so. And then hail risk is really only of any real consequence out in the high plains from Wyoming down into eastern Colorado. If we look at CSU's thunderstorm probabilities, they put actually put a 5% tornado risk right around Maryland and Washington, D.C. The hail expected and the wind risk about where that squall line will form out in the eastern seaboard, but going all the way down to South Carolina with their 15% risk in that area. And then we go ahead to Tuesday, western Kansas, eastern Colorado. In fact, this area is really where most of the severe weather will maintain itself for the next part of the week, really. Because here's Tuesday's forecast. Little tornado risk in eastern Colorado along with hail. And then the wind risk goes to the Carolinas on Tuesday, as you can see, highest probabilities there. Then on Wednesday, the SPC has outlined this severe weather risk area that includes Cheyenne, Denver, and Sterling, and Fort Collins and those areas of Colorado. CSU confirms that. So on the right is the panel I just showed you, and on the left is where CSU puts a little bullseye. And they do actually put one there in eastern Oklahoma, curiously. And then on Thursday, the whole area is still small but mighty, moves north a little bit and a little bit east as well. Not quite to Casper, Wyoming, but in that same general area. And then Thursday CSU outlook, it really does mention that it just broadens that area of 15% risk out in that part of Wyoming and Colorado and Nebraska. And then finally, we'll wrap up with the supercell percentages by NIU. First week here, really high as the scale goes, where that dark red is. And then the week of June 28th through July 4th, it shifts way to the north. Dakotas, Minnesota, that area up into Canada. Pretty typical as we get into early July. And then it really, really retreats quite far to the northwest and north as we get into around July 5th through the 11th.